Hey everyone, and welcome. Oh my gosh, I am so excited for what we're talking about today because it combines two of my absolute favorite things in the world, movies and love. I mean, who isn't a movie lover? There's just something magical about sinking down into a theater seat, the lights go down, and you just get to disappear into a whole other world for a couple of hours. And for me, there's no better story to get lost in than a really great romance. I get so swept up in them. You know, the big romantic gestures, the swoon-worthy speeches, the perfect witty banter. It's the best kind of escape. But I'll be honest, there's almost always a moment usually when my heart is doing little flips. And I'm totally all in that this tiny skeptical voice pops into my head and goes, yeah, sure, that would never happen in real life. And I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, right? We see these incredibly beautiful stories where the characters beat impossible odds, or they find each other across oceans, or they manage to fall in love all over again after something truly devastating happens, and it just feels like a total fantasy. I mean, we call it Hollywood magic for a reason. It's this perfectly polished dream that's designed to make us feel all warm and fuzzy. But what if I told you that sometimes the most unbelievable, heart-stopping, and truly inspiring love stories you see on screen aren't just made up? What if they're actually echoes of something real, something that actually happened to regular people, just like us? So today, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna pull back that cinematic curtain and explore the incredible, true stories that were the inspiration for some of the most memorable romantic movies we've ever seen. And as you're about to find out, real life can be just as dramatic and honestly often so much more moving. So why does this even matter? Why bother digging into the real story behind the movie? Well, for me, knowing the truth doesn't ruin the magic of the film at all. If anything, it makes it so much deeper. It adds this amazing new layer of humanity to it all. When you really understand the raw, messy, and often painful reality that a filmmaker started with, you start to appreciate their work on a whole new level. But even more than that, you just appreciate the incredible resilience of the human heart. These real stories, they aren't neat. Real life doesn't follow a script. You know, it doesn't have a tidy beginning, middle, and end. It's full of confusing bits, long stretches where nothing seems to happen, and the kind of exhausting emotional work that almost never makes it into the final version of a movie, and seeing that, acknowledging it, gives us a much richer, more honest picture of what love actually looks like. It's not just the highlight reel, it's the hard, courageous, everyday choice to just keep showing up for someone no matter what, and that really brings us to the core idea we're exploring today. You see, the big problem for any filmmaker trying to tell a true story is that life is just inherently messy. Real relationships don't have these perfectly timed plot points or a big climax right on cue. They're made up of a million tiny, quiet moments of long stretches of just work, and then suddenly a crisis pops up out of nowhere. Movies, on the other hand, need that structure. They need a clear arc to follow, so the solution is adaptation. Think of it like this. The real story is like a giant rough block of marble. It's full of potential, but it's also got a lot of imperfections and extra stone. The filmmaker is the sculptor. They have to carefully chip away all the little details that don't fit, smooth out the rough parts, and really focus on bringing out the core emotional shape that's hidden inside. They have to squeeze years into hours, turn up the volume on certain emotions, and often leave out the inconvenient parts that don't serve the story. They're trying to tell this explainer is our journey into that incredible artistic process as we look at 7 amazing films and the even more amazing true stories that started at all. So here's how we're going to break it down today. We've organized our journey into 3 main themes to really look at the different sides of these true life love stories. First up, we're diving into rebuilding love's foundation. These are stories where love wasn't about that first spark, but about the incredible heroic work of having to start all over again. Then we'll move on to crossing impossible divides, where love becomes this powerful act of rebellion against society, culture, and what everyone expects. And finally, we're going to venture into passion at the brink, looking at these intense, obsessive loves that really push human connection to its absolute limits. So let's dive in. Okay, so our first theme. Wow, it's maybe the most quietly heroic kind of love you can imagine. These aren't the stories about that giddy butterflies in your stomach feeling of falling in love for the first time. No, these are stories about what happens after everything has been shattered. They're about the unbelievable amount of patience, the deep wells of faith, and just the sheer willpower it takes to fix something that feels completely broken. These are stories of healing about choosing love not as a feeling, but as an action, something you do every single day. It's a love that's built not just on chemistry, but on character. Okay, first up, a movie that I'm pretty sure made every single one of us just ugly cry in the theater, The Vow, starring the impossibly charming Rachel McAdams and Channing Tatum. Oh man, I remember seeing it and just getting totally swept away by this epic romantic quest. A man's wife loses her memory of their entire life together in a horrible accident, and he has to somehow make her fall in love with them all over again. It felt like the ultimate romantic fantasy, right? You have this handsome, devoted guy trying to win back the woman he adores with these grand gestures and just unwavering patience. It's such a beautiful idea. But the real story that inspired it? Wow, I found out about it later, and it is so much more raw and honestly 1,000 times more powerful. And this right here, this is the key difference. The Hollywood version frames this as a romantic quest, like a brand new courtship. It's active and charming and all focused on the winning her back. But the real story for the couple who actually lived this Kim and Cricket Carpenter, it wasn't a quest. It was about survival. It was about the crushing day in, day out. Emotional labor of learning how to live with a total stranger who just happens to have the face of the person you love more than anyone in the world. Can you even imagine Cricket's terror waking up and being told you're married to a man? You have zero emotional connection to feeling trapped in a life that isn't yours, and then just think about Kim's grief. Grieving the loss of his wife, even though she was standing right there in front of him. The movie focuses on the romance of it all. The reality was about a brutal daily choice to honor a promise you made to a person who, in a way, didn't exist anymore. Okay, let's just pause and really take in the facts here because they're absolutely staggering. Just 2 months after their wedding, the Carpenters were in a horrific car accident. Cricket suffered a traumatic brain injury that completely wiped out the last 18 months of her memory. That means their entire relationship, how they met, their first dates, their engagement, their wedding day was just gone from her mind. She woke up from a coma, and the man sitting by her bed, the man who had been her everything, was a complete and total stranger. So, what do you even do? Kim didn't just have to tell her who he was. He had to convince her to build a whole new relationship with him from square one. Their journey wasn't about trying to recreate old memories because they couldn't. It was about creating new routines, relying on their shared faith and honoring the vows they made to each other. Even when the feelings, the memories, the entire foundation of their love was gone. It was a testament to persistence in its purest, most heartbreaking form. I want you to just sit with this question for a second. It comes from the book about their story, and it's just so devastatingly profound. So much of our love for someone is built on that shared history, right? That web of memories, all the inside jokes and experiences you've been through together. Memory is like the glue that holds a relationship together. So what happens when that glue just dissolves? How on earth do you even begin to rebuild? Kim Carpenter had to find a way. He had to build a bridge to his own wife across this terrifying canyon of amnesia. The film gives us the romance of that journey, but the real story gives us the sheer gut-wrenching difficulty of it, and in a way that makes the bond they eventually formed even more inspiring. It wasn't a love that was found, it was a love that was built brick by painful brick. Okay, from one kind of rebuilding to a completely different one. Let's talk about a story that was more than just a movie or a book. It was a full-on cultural phenomenon, Eat, Pray, Love, based on Elizabeth Gilbert's smash hit memoir. This story just resonated so deeply with millions of people, especially women. I think it's because it tapped into this really universal feeling of being lost in your own life and needing to find your way back to yourself. It basically gave a whole generation permission to believe that it's okay to take apart a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels totally empty inside, and to go on a journey, a literal one and a metaphorical one, to build a new one. And the film starring the amazing Julia Roberts just so beautifully captures the visual beauty of that journey. It is a total feast for the eyes. Now, what's super interesting here is how the movie shifts the focus just a little bit. The Hollywood version, because it has to streamlines the story into this beautiful linear path. Elizabeth is unhappy. She goes to Italy to eat and rediscover pleasure, then to India to pray and find her spiritual center, and finally to Bali to find love and finding Felipe, played by the wonderful Javier Bardem. It feels like the big prize at the end of her quest. It's the destination, but if you've read the book, you know, the real story is much more internal than, well, a lot messier. The real journey was about Elizabeth Gilbert healing herself by herself. The new love she found wasn't the goal of her recovery. It was a beautiful, unexpected part of it. It was proof that she had healed enough to be open to a healthy, balanced relationship again. The movie kind of frames love as the answer while the book frames love as a question you can only really ask once you've found the answer inside yourself. The real magic of Elizabeth Gilbert's memoir, and what the film does a great job of holding on to, is just how brutally honest she is. She didn't just write about the glamorous parts of travel. You know, eating gelato in Rome and biking through stunning rice paddies. She wrote about ugly crying on the bathroom floor, the deep, dark feelings of failure, the gut punch of loneliness, and the really hard, uncomfortable work of meditation and self-reflection. And yes, she really did meet Jose Nunez in Bali, who she called Felipe in the book, and their relationship was so important because he offered her a totally new way of being in a partnership, one that was gentle and supportive and equal. Especially after the trauma of her divorce, the movie captures the romance of it all so beautifully. But the book gives us the full, candid, and sometimes awkward picture of what it really takes to renew yourself, and that's why I became such a lifeline for so many people. It made feeling broken feel universal and, more importantly, totally fixable. You know, when you look at these two stories side by side, they're really asking the same thing, aren't they? Whether it's your memory of a person that's been broken or your own heart that's been shattered into a million pieces, how do you find the courage to even start again? How do you rebuild trust and intimacy and a real connection from the ground up? It really makes you think that maybe the strongest kind of love isn't the one that never breaks, but the one that knows how to put itself back together again. These stories show us that it's not about the big cinematic gestures, but about the quiet, consistent, and unbelievably brave choices you make every single day. Okay, time to shift gears completely. We're moving from that internal work of rebuilding to the external battles that some couples are forced to fight in these next stories. The main conflict isn't just between two people. It's between the couple and like the entire world. This is about love that crosses these seemingly impossible lines of culture, of geography, of what society says is okay. This is about love as an act of defiance, a choice that forces people to question everything they thought they knew about themselves and where they belong now. This next film might be one you haven't heard of, but trust me, it is unforgettable. It's a German film called The White Messiah. It's based on an international best-selling memoir by a Swiss woman named Corinne Hoffmann, and the setup is just, wow, it's completely wild. A woman is on vacation in Kenya with her boyfriend. She sees a Samburu warrior, a man named Lekatenga, and in that one single moment, decides to change her entire life. She breaks up with her boyfriend right then and there, flies back to Switzerland, sells her successful business, and moves to a remote, dusty village in the Kenyan wilderness to find and be with this man. It is the ultimate romantic leap of faith, driven by this intoxicating, all-consuming attraction that just defies all logic, and the movie, it does such an amazing job of pulling you into that fantasy. It captures the intoxicating, almost dreamlike feeling of their early romance. The incredible landscapes of Kenya, the beauty and dignity of the Samburu people, the raw passion between these two people from completely different universes. It's visually stunning and you get totally swept up in her dream. But as the movie goes on, it stays brutally honest to the memoir's core truth and the truth. This was not a fairy tale. The real story was one of a difficult and ultimately failed attempt to adapt to a new life. It was a story defined by the harsh realities of poverty, by debilitating diseases like malaria, by intense, culturally driven jealousy, and by this constant grinding friction between two people who are trying to bridge an ocean of cultural differences. I mean, let's be real about what Corinne Hoffmann was trying to do. She didn't just move to a new country. She tried to completely integrate into a nomadic, patriarchal community with deeply held traditions that were totally foreign to her. She lived in a small hut and made of mud and cow dung. She had to learn to deal with food and water scarcity. and she tried to navigate a world where a husband's word and community duties were absolute. Her book is so gripping because it doesn't try to sugarcoat the failures. She talks about how her modern Western ideas about partnership and independence and what it means to be faithful were constantly clashing with Okantangas. For example, he couldn't understand why she would want to run her own shop. He saw it as a threat to his role as a man. His jealousy, which seemed totally possessive to her, was a normal expression of ownership in his culture. In the end, their love, as passionate as it was, just wasn't enough to overcome these massive cultural and structural divides. It's a heartbreaking but really important story about the limits of romance when it comes up against the full force of reality. Now, for a very different kind of cultural story, this is a Soviet-era film called Winter Cherry, and it was a huge deal in its time in the West. We're so used to love stories that have clear heroes and villains, or at least clear choices, and big dramatic endings. But this film gave audiences something totally different. It was a quiet, sad, and deeply human look at the complicated realities of adult love, desire, and disappointment, all within the unique constraints of Soviet society. It tells the story of a woman named Olga, a single mother who is smart, beautiful, and just deeply, achingly lonely. If Hollywood made this movie, you know exactly how it would go, right? It would be this big, dramatic love triangle where Olga has to make a definitive choice between two men, and it would end with either triumphant or a tragic moment. We demand that kind of resolution. But what makes Winter Cherries so powerful and so true to life is that it refuses to give you that easy answer. The real story it's telling is about the soul-crushing ambiguity of real relationships that just never quite work out. It's a movie about conversations that never get finished, about chances. You don't take about the slow, painful acceptance of disappointment is just a part of life. It doesn't give you easy answers or judge anyone instead. It just sits with these characters in their complex, messy, and unresolved lives, and it finds the poetry in that. The movie feels so real because it's all in the small stuff, the everyday details of Olga's life. She's a single mom trying to balance her career, raise her son, and find some little piece of happiness for herself in a society that really didn't offer much support for women like her. She's in love with a married man who either can't or won't leave his family, and at the same time, she's seeing another guy who offers her stability, but absolutely no passion. The film just beautifully shows that universal struggle between what our heart wants and what the cold, hard logistics of life will actually let us have. What do you do when none of the options feel right? The story is so relatable because it's built on these small, quiet moments, a small kindness from a friend, the sharp pang of regret over a bad decision, and that stubborn little flicker of hope that maybe one day things will be different. It's a powerful look at how regular people manage to hold on to hope even when they're managing constant disappointment. Okay, before we get to our last section, we need to talk about a specific idea that really connects these next few films. Cinematic obsession, we usually think of love and movies as being about partnership and support and mutual respect, a force for good. But there's this whole other category of love stories, often the most shocking and controversial ones that explore a totally different side of human connection. These are stories where love isn't a partnership. It's an all-consuming, suffocating, and often self-destructive force. It's that moment when passion crosses a line into something much darker, where "I can't live without you" stops being a romantic line and starts being a terrifying reality. So yeah, brace yourselves. We're going to a much darker place now. Our final section, Passion at the Brink, looks at love stories that were forged under the most extreme circumstances. You can imagine, these are stories from the very edge. Love in the face of a total disaster. Love that turns into a criminal obsession, and love that has to deal with the complete breakdown of the human mind. These movies challenge our ideas of what love, devotion, and sacrifice even mean. They are not always easy to watch, but they are absolutely impossible to forget. We are starting with one of the most controversial films ever, Nagisa Oshima's In the Realm of the Senses, and let's be upfront, this movie is designed to be shocking. It is graphically sexual and deeply, deeply unsettling, but it's not just for shock value. It is a direct, unflinching movie version of a real and infamous criminal case that happened in Japan back in the 1930s. The film forces you to look at a love story that spirals into a dark, destructive obsession, and it demands that you reckon with it without looking away and without the comfort of easy moral judgments. The true story is about a woman named Sada, a bae, a former geisha, and her lover, Kichizo Ishida. They started this torrid affair and basically locked themselves away from the entire world, getting lost in a relationship that got more and more intense until it ended in a shocking, taboo-breaking act of violence. What the director Nagisha Oshima did was he took the known facts of this case and put them on screen with this stark, almost documentary, honesty. He refused to romanticize it or explain it away with psychology. He wasn't interested in why they did what they did. Instead, he just presents their obsession as this absolute all-consuming force that completely takes over their world, shutting everything else out until only their desire is left. The film was a direct challenge to Japanese censorship laws at the time, but more than that, it challenges all of us to draw our own lines between passion, obsession, and destruction. It's a powerful, if deeply disturbing example of a filmmaker using a true story to explore the darkest corners of human desire from that intense two-person world. We're now zooming out to a catastrophe on a massive scale. Let's talk about the Ukrainian film Moths. This film tells a love story set against the backdrop of one of the most terrifying man-made disasters in human history, the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown in 1986. It's a story about how life and love can stubbornly find a way to exist, even in the most apocalyptic situations. It explores how a crisis like that can strip everything away until only the most essential things are left, forcing people to decide who they really are when the world as they know it is literally ending around them. So even though the main characters aren't real people, the story itself is soaked in the reality of what happened at Chernobyl. Filmmakers who create stories like this often rely heavily on survivor testimonies, on historical records, and on news reports to create a sense of emotional truth. The disaster acts like a pressure cooker for human emotion. All of a sudden, every small intimate moment, every tiny choice has this immense weight and urgency because life itself is hanging by a thread. Time gets compressed when you don't know if you'll live to see tomorrow. What does forever even mean? What do ideas like fidelity and sacrifice look like? This film uses that extreme pressure to explore how human connection can be both incredibly fragile and unbelievably resilient in the face of total chaos. It shows us that even in the literal fallout of a disaster, people will still reach for each other, searching for a moment of connection in the madness. Okay, let's come back from the edge a little with our last film, a movie. We all love the sweet, funny rom-com 50, First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore on the surface. It's this high-concept, lighthearted story about a guy who falls for a woman with a very unique kind of amnesia. She can't form any new memories. So every single day, he has to come up with a new creative way to meet her and make her fall in love with him all over again. It's charming, it's hilarious, it has a ton of heart. But what you might not know is that this sweet, funny idea comes from the tragic reality of a very real and devastating neurological condition. And this is just such a wild contrast, right? The movie takes this condition and tarot-grade amnesia and spins it into a romantic comedy. It's a playful courtship full of funny schemes and silly moments, all leading to this hopeful, happy ending where love finds a way. But the real story for people who live with this condition and for their families is anything but a comedy. Antero-grade amnesia is this tragic state of being permanently stuck in the present moment, unable to build a future on shared memories. The reality is one of profound, constant loss for both the person with the condition and their loved ones. And the real story of their partners is one of incredible adaptive devotion, a love that has to constantly reinvent itself not as a fun game, but as a necessary and often heartbreaking act of care. The film's premise reflects real neurological cases. And the most famous one is probably a man named Clive Waring, a British musician who was left with a memory span of only a few seconds after an illness. He couldn't remember what happened just moments before, but he always recognized his wife, Deborah. His diary was filled with entries crossed out and rewritten every few minutes that all said, "I am now awake for the first time." Her life became a series of first meetings. She documented their life together in a beautiful memoir showing how her devotion had to adapt. She had to greet him as if for the first time. Hundreds of times a day. What 50 First Dates does so cleverly is it takes that core idea of adaptive love and transforms it. It turns the tragic repetition into a romantic ritual. It turns a heartbreaking syndrome into a story about the endless creative possibilities of love. It's a choice that finds a way to celebrate the same profound resilience and devotion that people like Deborah Waring live out every single day. Wow. So after all of that, after journeying through these 7 incredible stories of rebuilding, of rebellion, of obsession, what's the big takeaway? We've seen love tested by memory loss, by huge cultural divides, by personal demons, and even by a nuclear disaster. Bringing them all together like this reveals some really powerful truths. Not just about the people who live these lives, but about the art of telling stories and about the vows, both the spoken ones and the unspoken ones, that we all make in our own relationships when we really look at these real stories. A few key lessons just jump out: stories like The White Messiah show us the deep cultural friction is real and passionate chemistry alone can't always fix it. Stories like The Vow and The Truth Behind 50 First Dates shine a light on the incredible, often invisible endurance that caretaking requires, a kind of love that's less about romance and more about relentless, active support. Stories like In the Realm of the Senses are a chilling warning about the razor-thin line between passion and destructive obsession. But I think the biggest lesson, the one that runs through all of them, is about the quiet heroism of just choosing someone every single day. It's not about the one big gesture that makes it into the movie trailer. It's about the 1,000 small, consistent, unglamorous choices to show up, to adapt, to forgive, and to start again. That is the real love story. And here they are all together. 7 films, 7 windows into the human heart. The Vow, about rebuilding a life from shattered memories. Eat, Pray, love a journey to find yourself, and by doing that, find a new way to love the White Messiah. A cautionary tale about the clash of worlds and the limits of passion. Winter Cherry, a portrait of quiet compromise and stubborn hope in the realm of the senses. A dark dive into all-consuming obsession, Moths. A story of love's improbable survival against all odds, and 50 First Dates, a comedy that finds profound devotion inside a tragic reality. Each one is a powerful reminder that the most compelling fiction is often just real life, rearranged a little for the big screen. So now I have to ask you, after hearing the real stories behind the Hollywood sparkle, which one hits you the hardest? Is it the quiet daily persistence of Kim Carpenter, the brave self-discovery of Elizabeth Gilbert, or the defiant passion of Corinne Hoffman? Which of these messy, complicated real-life stories makes you believe in the power and the possibility of love the most? I would absolutely love to hear what you think, so please share it in the comments below. For me, I think it always comes back to The Vow, the idea of choosing to love someone who doesn't remember you, to patiently reintroduce yourself to your own wife every single day, and work to build something new from nothing. That level of commitment. That's just completely awe-inspiring to me. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the real stories behind the romance. It's been such a joy to share them with you. If you enjoyed this explainer, and you want to explore more of the fascinating truths behind the things we think we know, please don't forget to like this explainer and subscribe to the channel. We have so many more great ideas and incredible stories coming your way. Until next time, keep looking for the truth behind the fiction. Bye!